I'm Alex Frank, and Joe Burrow played football on Monday. When could we see a return to game action? Could it be next Sunday against New England?
And how much will it matter with a defense that needs to prove that it's not the worst we've seen in the last 25 years?
Well, hey, as soon as we clean up that training room and get those players back out, who knows?
Good day. It's the Bengals Squad. Everything Cincinnati Bengals every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the Queen City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. From the jungle to the playoffs, the Bengals Squad Show starts now.
No, potentially 3-6 to the playoffs if this season goes the way we hope it goes the rest of the way. Hey, welcome to Bengals Squad. It's the debut episode. I'm Alex Frank alongside Jake Liscow and Art Valero. I'm on Twitter, by the way, Frankie_Natty. Jake, as you see on Twitter, at Jake Liscow. Art at Coach Art Valero. This is not a replacement to Locked On Bengals. This is actually a supplement to Locked On Bengals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network, your team every day. Locked On Bengals, we're going to go twice a week, including after every Bengals game. It's a long-form conversational show where we talk everything Bengals and we get you ready for the upcoming game and so much more. My name's Alex Frank. I'm a lifelong Bengals season ticket holder, third generation, lifelong Bengals fan, covering the Bengals for Cincy Jungle over at SB Nation. As I mentioned, I have the privilege of being joined by Jake Liscow and Coach Art Valero. Art is a former Super Bowl winning head coach, not head coach, excuse me, but he coached with John Gruden. He was the tight ends coach of the 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Gentlemen, it's so great to have you. We're going to talk all things Joe Burrow being back. We're going to talk about this defense, Joe Flacco, and of course, it's Steeler week. Jake, you know what that means, right? It's a pretty big week in Cincinnati.
Big week in Cincinnati, big week for any potential playoff hopes, I would say. I mean, at 3-6, it's a narrow path to get there. You get the extra game, that helps a little bit. You know, you're not on a 16-game schedule anymore, so there's a little bit more wiggle room. I think you probably need at least 10 wins to win the AFC North, and the division matchups are going to be the most important thing. So coming out of the bye for the third time in 4 years against the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is a weird scheduling idiosyncrasy, it's absolutely a big game if they're going to make Joe Burrow's return relevant.
Yeah, that's a great point there. You mentioned 3 of the last 4 seasons the Bengals out of the bye have played the Steelers. They won in Pittsburgh in 2022. Joe Burrow was terrific in that game, threw for 4 touchdowns, 3 of which were to Samaje Perine. They lost last year 44-38. Art, when your teams face division rivals in the NFL, was there a little like a different sense, different urgency, different vibe in the locker room and around the facility that week?
Oh, absolutely. These are people that you play twice a year. So not only if you've already played them, like the Bengals have already played the Steelers once and came out on top. So now you're trying to break those tendencies, trying to do everything else, and you're polishing yourself up. And this game in particular is almost like a playoff game. This is a must-have for the Bengals. It really establishes the rest of their season. And that's the exciting thing about this week.
That's a great point there because you think about the last time these two teams played, and Jake, you and James talked about this a lot. That game essentially felt like the season. If the Bengals had won, which they did, they would have been 3-4. The season would have felt like back on track. Unfortunately, the last 2 weeks have kind of derailed any goodwill that win brought. But we're going to get into that game. We're going to get into Joe Burrow. We're going to get into the defense. We're going to talk about Joe Flacco. Art's a former offensive line coach, so he's going to tell us what the offensive line has been doing to allow Joe Flacco and the running game to flourish these last few weeks. But we'll start with Joe Burrow. Jake, when you first heard the news that he was clear to practice, albeit in a limited capacity, your reaction was what?
Yeah, shock. I mean, it's at least a month earlier than I expected, although like maybe end of November could have made sense to open up the 21-day window, knowing that they're going to take some of the time in that window just because of the injury. Turf toe, notoriously insidious, notoriously has a recurrence rate that you really want to avoid. And it's a little bit different for Joe because he went through the surgery and he's been totally off it after that surgery, going through rehab. So shouldn't be exactly a Brock Purdy situation, but of course, what's scary about it is that Brock Purdy aggravated that turf toe injury that he had with the San Francisco 49ers this year with the steel plate in his shoe. And Burrow has different footwear on now than he did several weeks ago when he hurt his foot. And almost certainly has a carbon fiber plate in there or a steel plate in there. But no matter what timeline you're looking for, and we talk to doctors of sports, not sports medicine, but doctors of physiotherapy, doctors of physical therapy, and talked about the various rehab programs. I talked to my own physical therapist about what this recovery could look like for Joe Burrow. And none of the timelines that I heard from any medical professional that I talked to were this fast. So whatever Joe's doing to get back on the field is obviously working exceptionally well ahead of schedule. And the question remains to me, there's two really. One is, how much will it end up mattering? Can they do enough to stay relevant? And two is, what is actually that re-injury rate? And what's the risk tolerance that we have to play with here when considering Burrow's return?
It's a great point because we already saw Brock Purdy. I know we mentioned him a lot this season in reference to Joe Burrow's injury because of the fact that he came back early from the injury he sustained in week 1 and really hasn't played since. So you do wonder about that. Art, I got to ask you, because you coached offensive line, which is a position known for the toughness of that. When you see a quarterback like Joe Burrow already practicing, what does it say to you about his toughness and coming back way quicker than I think a lot of us expected?
Well, you know what? First of all, they have the utmost respect for anybody that goes behind the center. And they did with Joe, and they do with both Joes. The one thing that having Joe Burrow come out early is they know, and they've seen him almost every day in their rehabbing, getting treatment, bringing that thing back, because he is not giving up on this team. And through the growing pains of having 2 brand new guards, having a couple of veteran tackles and a veteran center, hey, it's just a matter of the continuity part. And it says, hey, we do our job, and it's our job to create not only a run situation like we do now, or we have to protect the passer so we don't put him in those vulnerable situations like we were before. So their hats are off to them. They're excited, although they're excited about how they're performing now because offensively they're doing well.
They are doing well. I mean, look, they're practically the best offense in the NFL since Joe Flacco became the starting quarterback, which we're going to talk about in segment 3 of this show today. I think when I first heard the news, like, obviously, Jake, you mentioned the word shocked, but at the same time, like Art, what you mentioned, Joe Burrow is built different, okay? And it's been that way his entire career. His career is one of resilience. His career has been unconventional in the fact that he transferred from Ohio State down to LSU. He comes to Cincinnati, first season, tears his ACL. Next season, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Bengals are playing in the Super Bowl and are this close to bringing a Lombardi trophy back to Cincinnati. And you think about all that has happened since then, the wrist, the calf, heck, in 2021 alone, he had a pinky injury in early December. Jake, you remember that? He had a sprained MCL after the Super Bowl. So there are so many things Joe Burrow has had to overcome in his career, in addition to the offensive line, which has been discussed heavily since he was drafted. But I think when I first heard the news, and then I heard what he said in his press conference on Monday when he talked about how he was sad and how it was just so difficult for him to once again have to not be playing because of an injury. This is the second time since he signed his contract extension back in 2023 that he has not been on the field for an extended period of time. And for as a competitor that he is, I was thinking to myself, how must he be feeling if Jake, me, you as Bengals fans feel that we're missing out on one of the greatest quarterbacks in the NFL today. So to know that he can return, it is such a boost for this team, because you think about what they went through the last 2 weeks against the Jets and the Bears. And now all of a sudden you think, okay, we've gotten away from football a little bit. Now all of a sudden our franchise quarterback's going to come back. Who knows when he's going to be? I mean, Joe Burrow talked about it'd be very meaningful for him to come back on Thanksgiving against Baltimore. I can't tell you the vibes around this city as a community of Bengals fans having that glimmer of hope that, hey, you know what? This franchise quarterback that we know is very good and is very good in November and December could potentially come back in a wide open AFC. 2 things. 1, it's positive, but 2, it just makes you think, man, if that defense had just gotten one stop against the Jets or the Bears.
Yeah, I mean, they're one play away in both of those games, and the opportunity lost there. If you're talking about a 5-4 team right now instead of a 3-6 team, they've done their job. Joe Flacco, the trade is successful, and I think the trade is successful either way, but you've accomplished the goal of surviving until a potential Joe Burrow return. And unfortunately, it hasn't gone that way. You mentioned the list of injuries that Burrow has gone through. There's a throat contusion in there as well. We couldn't talk for a couple of weeks. And what's interesting is that this is the first ligament injury that we're going to see Burrow recover from in season. I know he played through the MCL issue in the Super Bowl, but the other ligament injuries that Burrow has dealt with, the wrist, obviously, and the knee, have been season enders that have held him out until the offseason when he's had time to recover. And the calf injury, a different kind of injury, a muscle injury that Joe Burrow, when he was talking about his injury history in that press conference, highlighted as like, yeah, that's a little bit different when you're coming back from a muscle versus when you're coming back from a ligament. I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of how my ligaments heal and what I need to do to be back on the field. And so the guy that knows his body well has gone through a lot of rehab before. But what makes it unique and why it was so surprising is we haven't seen him try to come back from this significant kind of injury in season before. They've all been, like I said, season enders, off season of rehab, slowly working into training camp. And the calf, when he came back from it, he re-injured it, and then he played through it, wasn't very mobile. And I think that memory is seared into people's brains a little bit as well. But obviously Burrow's return is going to matter from a football perspective when he's on the field. As much respect and love as I have for what Joe Flacco has done for this team, and as much as I love to be poetic about it, Joe Burrow is simply a better quarterback, one of the best to do it in the NFL. And with the schedule getting tougher, they need to win some games for this to really matter. But in terms of the football product, in terms of the offense, when the defenses get a little bit tougher here as the winter comes on, you're going to be happy that Joe Burrow's out there if the risk is worth the reward.
Coach,
Absolutely. You know what? I tell you what, the one thing about Joe Burrow in this conversation is, one, he's a coach's kid. He grew up around this sport. He knows what mental toughness is. He's very self-conscious about the team and how the team perceives him as he looks at it, and he's saying, wait a minute, forgetting the money, he's looking at it and he's saying, you know what? I owe this team. This is my team. And everybody is relegated to that fact, but he's not there to watch it. The great thing about it is you do have a Joe Flacco who offensively is allowing us to continue to go and perform while some of these young guys are still learning the offense. You know, and you got two great wideouts that are there, you know, and they just want the football. And so the caveat with me is hard to pick dates to come back, because you don't want to come back too early. And I think that's the importance of this game. Is this going to tell him, and it's going to tell the rest of the people that are monitoring him, when can we expect him to get back to full speed, get our timing down with those wide receivers, get the O-line. Now you got a new cadence that's coming. You remember it, but those things are relatively new. And so there's a couple of weeks there where you have to get that game time speed back into his play. And I think the thing with Joe Burrow, I mean, shoot, if they win this Sunday, they take it a couple more weeks and they win, that's a tough decision, because you have continuity and you're rolling. Now that can push Joe's back a little bit more. Now with Joe being 40, well, that's a whole nother ball game. Now he took some hits last week and I'm sure he was sore. 40-year-old bodies don't heal, as I know, quite like they do when you're, under 30.
And
40-year-olds. Go ahead, Jake.
The conversation in Pittsburgh right now, speaking of 40-year-old quarterbacks, is like, is Aaron Rodgers going to do what Russell Wilson did? And we're going to get to this game later, I know, but when you're talking about 40-year-old quarterbacks, we've seen it with Joe Flacco too, where he started hot with teams and hasn't necessarily been able to keep that up. And when he's dealing with that shoulder, that is a bit concerning. So
Yeah.
it'll certainly be an interesting conversation from that perspective. But I think if Burrow's healthy and he wants to play, he's going to play. Nobody in this Bengals organization has been able to tell that guy no.
Yeah,
exactly. But
sure.
and you know what else 40-year-old quarterbacks have trouble doing that Joe Flacco has done is throw for 470 yards with a sprained AC joint. It's one of the most incredible resilient performances by any quarterback in NFL history. Unfortunately, when you have a defense like the Bengals, yeah, it kind of overshadows what Joe Flacco was able to do. Is this defense really the worst in NFL this century? The metrics are suggesting it is, but what about the eye test? We'll tell you what we're seeing, pun intended, and that will come up next on Bengal Squad. When the opening whistle blows on a repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts for a fast project? Well, Supply House has next day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The part finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. Their Trademaster perks, including priority shipping and dedicated support, make the whole process smoother. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. Check out Locked On Bengals Daily with Jake and James every day. They have a mega preview coming your way tomorrow of the Bengals and the Steelers. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. James and Locked On Steelers host Chris Carter had their crossover Thursday today. That's up on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Back on Bengals Squad with Jake Liscow and Art Valero. Gentlemen, the defense of the Bengals, see, it's so crazy to me. Here's where we're at right now. Just 4 years ago when the Bengals were in the Super Bowl, the conversations about this team were Joe Burrow and the offensive line and being able to protect him. Unfortunately, Joe Burrow has proven to overcome a bad offensive line, but now we're talking about how bad this defense is. It's Joe Burrow and the defense. My, how times have changed. What are you two seeing with this Bengals defense, and why are they just, I don't know how else to say it, but bad?
Yeah, I mean, they're, by statistically speaking, the second worst in EPA per play since 2000, with only the 2008 Detroit Lions worst. They're worst in defensive success rate. They're worst in points per game. They're second worst in yards per game allowed. They're fourth worst in yards per player allowed and fourth worst in yards per carry allowed. At least they were last time I checked, which, to be fair, was 11 days ago now. And there are a couple teams in the 2025 season that are with them in the yards per carry conversation, the 25 Buffalo Bills and the 25 New York Giants. But the problems, and I'm curious to get your take on this, Art, look like they're guys that don't know where they should be when they should be there, guys that are going under blocks, not playing physical enough, guys that are stopping their feet on contact when they try to tackle, which is one of many reasons I think they're having tackling issues. We have guys that don't look like they're playing assignment sound football to me in the run game. And Art, I'm curious from your perspective when you watch this defense. I know they're missing Trey Hendricks, and I know Shamar Stewart's dealt with injuries, but Shamar Stewart doesn't look like he's ready. It looks like the game's moving really fast for these rookies, and there are a lot of rookies out there. And I don't really have an explanation for what's going on at safety at this point, other than maybe they're just not consistent enough players. But it seems like a series of unfortunate and what's the word I'm looking for? Cascading events that leads to the product being as poor as it's been. What do you see, Art, when you look at the film, and if you're trying to like figure out, okay, these are the things that I would prioritize working on if I'm Al Gordon and the defensive staff?
No question. I tell you what, those defensive coaches and the defensive players, they see that they got to hold up their end of the bargain. Now, there's so many young guys that they're asking to perform, and they don't quite know the NFL yet. And you guys you mentioned it earlier. The speed of the game is totally different than it is in college. The physicality of the game, totally different than it is in college. And the schematics of the game is quite different. So having a new system, it's almost inexcusable for every front and coverage in the system for them to get the ball ran on them like they're getting the ball ran on them. The run fits aren't right. And that's the first thing that they have to get taken care of. If know where the secondary fits and know where the linebackers fit, and then especially the two inside defensive tackles, hey, on a defensive call, if you have it, you have a gap. And you can't jump the gap or miss your assignment, even if you're not, and don't try to make plays. You have to be, as a front four, your job is to keep those linebackers clean so they can make the plays. And then you make them when they're available to you. You know, and so I would work on run fits, I think are very, very important for them, and tackling all the way through. Go back to training camp when you worked on tackling, and it's very, very hard because you don't want to be banging on each other, but you can get back to the fundamentals. And that is the biggest thing that you asked earlier, how many game films have I watched? I've watched quite a bit, and the bad thing is they're losing their integrity of the tackling part of the game. And that's where you go. And some of them look really not very courageous. It's like a business decision, like they used to say about Dion. You know, do you really want to tackle that guy? That's a business decision. And that's what it appears at times with some of these young kids. You know, you got some secondary guys out too, and now you're putting the onus on those young linebackers to make up the difference and cover. So it's a ways away. And I think the biggest help they can get is guys out of the training room. And hopefully this bye, they took advantage of it. They get some guys back to where they can now start playing. And instead of thinking, they can react. And I think that will solve a lot of issues. Because I know this, players don't want to get beat up. Coaches don't want to get beat up. And they're part of a team. And I think Zach's got a good formula going. They just need everybody to join in and go. And you know what the biggest problem is? It's like they just created a signing last week with somebody that was on the practice squad, a linebacker. Well, you take those young kids off of special teams, and now you lose some of those guys. So your special teams is the next thing that is hindered because you just run out of bodies.
Art, let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
There's a question posed to Al Golden before the bye week, or maybe it was right after that Bears game. And it was essentially like, can we make it any easier for these guys so that they can play faster? And Golden's response was essentially, I can't really make it any simpler. When you hear that from a defensive coordinator, what goes through your head?
Oh boy.
Really the wrong excuse. You know, you say, hey, we're working on it every day. Kids are getting better. But you never show your shortcomings. And once you do that, you've kind of lost part of the room. You know?
And do you think like some of this could just be first-year defensive coordinator trying to get his feet in the ground, trying to figure out what his system is, who his guys are? Because, you know, transition to college to the NFL. But when I hear that I can't make it simpler, that's pretty discouraging to hear.
Especially when they did tackling drills in practice the week leading up to the Bears game, as if they were going back to fundamentals. But then, Art, as you mentioned, they were worse at tackling against the Bears than they were against the 0-7 Jets.
Yeah, that's a courage thing that you have to look at your players and say, really? We worked on it. Here are the drills we had. We went about it. We felt comfortable going in. And all of a sudden we got to the game. And you either can't or you won't. That's what it comes down to, especially in the NFL. Everybody is a do, and that's when your team starts to look at you a little sideways when you turn stuff down. And I think that's really bad. But, you know, when you go back to where Al is as far as a college coach going into the NFL, you know, Al's a good football coach, and he's been everywhere he's been. He's been good. And the one thing that that you have to remember is when you come from college into the National Football League, the field is different because of the hash marks. So something that might have been creatively very good in college is different because you're always in the middle of the field. You know, you're either right middle or left middle when it comes to a college football player, but now you're always there, and there's not a lot of space. So your drop landmarks are a little bit different in the passing game. Your run fits are a little bit different in the running game, and it's getting those things across. And those are the things that you work on all off season. You feel comfortable with going into camp. You know, then when you lose a couple of guys or you trade a couple of guys that were on board, it's tough. You really have to simplify it. And unfortunately, that's where you come in as a position coach, is making it very, very not simple, but easy to where they can understand it and they can get rid of everything they learned before. And now this is your job and this is what you have to do, and then let them go out there and play.
Okay, so the key thing we're hitting on here is how much more let me rephrase that. How much more simple does this have to get? Real quick, today's episode of Bengals Squad is sponsored by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 lineups once you play your first $5 lineup. Okay, Art, you bring up some really interesting points. Jake, I think what's interesting is this. So last season, the Bengals lose so many games that they should have won because the defense couldn't get that one stop. And yet here we are, the last two games, they haven't been able to get that one stop. Well, Al Golden, his new staff comes in. He, as you mentioned, are a really good defensive coach. We saw it with the Bengals in the first part of the Joe Burrow era. When they went to the Super Bowl, they had good linebackers, Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt, who both won or helped win playoff games via late fourth quarter interceptions. Well, Al Golden comes back this season. And what happens? Logan Wilson requests a trade. See ya. McKinley Jackson's requested a trade. Where's he been? You think maybe he could help? It's like when I watch this team play, what my eyes are telling me is this. If something goes wrong early on in the game, let's take the last two games, for example. You look at the Jets game, and to their credit, the defense played well early. Barrett Carter had a good fourth down stop early on in the game. Bengals were up 17-3. You're thinking, okay, this is going to be a good day. They might give up some yards and points to Justin Fields and the Jets. The Bengals aren't, at that point, we knew they weren't going to be a dominant defense like your 2002 Buccaneers had, but they were certainly going to be a competent defense. And then all of a sudden, second quarter, Justin Fields throws a touchdown pass on 4th and 1. Jordan Battle comes on a safety blitz. For some reason, he hesitated right before he got to Justin Fields. I still don't know why. And then Dax Hill doesn't get his head around, or the ball is just thrown so perfectly it's a touchdown. That's then the Jets game. Then you go to the Bears game. Early on in that game, what happened? Illegal contact on a third down sack keeps the drive alive. Bears score on a 4th and goal, razzle-dazzle, Ben Johnson special, Caleb Williams receiving touchdown. Second quarter, DJ Ivy's offsides on the field. I believe the field goal was missed. So offsides on a missed field goal. What happens? Bears get a 4th and 1. They go for it. They get it. Boom. They score a touchdown, take the lead. When stuff like that happens early on in the game, and when you're already not a really good defense, you need some breaks to go your way early. But when they don't, this defense just crumbles and they don't know what to do. That right there, going back to Art, what you're saying is a courage thing. It's the fact that this defense, to me, is not resilient like the defenses in 21 and 22, and heck, even 2023, where when they had DJ Reader on their team. This defense, I don't like using the word soft loosely because if I say it, that's, a very serious saying. Art, that being a coach. But that's just to me what this defense is playing like. It's like, I don't know what they're doing. I'm seeing guys out of position. I'm seeing Geno Stone get pushed all the way into the Bears bench. Shamar Stewart's being pushed out of the play before it even happens. I mean, what I'm seeing is a defense that it is not resilient in any way. And if something goes wrong early, they simply cannot recover. One thing leads to another. It's a big avalanche. Or when you were coaching, how much did you talk about, okay, and John Gruden, I'm sure mentioned this. Men, if something doesn't go our way, What are we going to do? Are we just going to throw in the towel? Oh, man, we were doing well before then, but we'll just see how we do after that. Or we're going to be like, toughen up, toughness, mental toughness. Is that what John Gruden was like and you were like, Art, when you were coaching Tampa Bay?
Oh, without question. The one thing that is, you're going to deal with adversity on both sides of the ball. There's going to be an adverse moment come up in the game, and it may be early and it may be later, and it's who is mentally tough enough to get through those points. Now, the one thing with the Bengals that I see just watching film now, I don't know the players, I don't know their backup, but they're in search of somebody to lead them on the field between the lines to step up and become the leader and get them all on the same page where they're all competing. And those missed tackles, those things, you're not competing. And I think that that's where they really miss. They miss veteran leadership, that guys that are be there. And it's hard for Trey. He's in the training room. He's hard to be a leader. You can't say what you can't do. And so they need one of those veterans on defense who's performing at a level that he can go to people and say, hey, you know what? We got to clean this up. And we got to clean it up now. And that's personal challenge for each of us. And I know that John used to say it all the time. He challenged, I tell you one thing that I can remember vividly. During training camp and a team meeting, he challenged Derek Brooks in the defense, which we have some great players. I mean, a lot of Hall of Famers now. But he challenged, he said, you know what? I need 10 touchdowns out of you this year. Lo and behold, what'd we get? 10 touchdowns out the defense. So he talked about it. They took it personal. They knew they were responsible for that, and they went out and they did it. And I think that that's where leadership from the top, down to your players, down to that youngest man that's in your locker room, and that's the way you play because that's the way you practiced. You practice about turning the ball over. You talk about wrapping up. And Monty Kiffin always used to have a saying, in practice when we don't tackle, he talked about being close enough and shooting your guns. Just like a cowboy with two guns on each hip. You had to shoot your guns, follow through, and go. And, that resonated with me a lot because we worked on tackling even though we did not tackle. So, yeah, that's a mindset. And it's a constant preach. And if the preaching isn't happening to you now, then maybe you have to take a look at it's not coming across. So how do I change that message to make them and make us a better football team?
But, Jake, you are around this team, to what Art is saying, if you don't have those veteran leaders, well, they did, and Logan Wilson, and now he is with the Dallas Cowboys in a trade. So essentially you're saying, all right, we're going to continue to get younger on defense, but the young guys aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so then what are you going to do? Well, we're going to try again in the draft. That isn't working. So it was the answer to do what they did in 21, which is sign a bunch of free agents, which actually worked. Is that where you're thinking, Jake?
I think you got to get to the offseason and see what free agents are even available to you. I was looking at the class of 22, which is set to be free agents this year. And there's some guys out there, but the guys that, could probably help you are going to be top of market players that the Bengals don't tend to play in those waters. The difference between this year and 2021 is that they're paying their stars already. There's a second quarterback contract. There's a massive Jamar Chase contract. There's a big T. Higgins contract. And there's the specter of Trey Hendrickson hanging over this offseason as well, where the expectation is that he'll depart as a free agent, but the franchise tag is an option for the Bengals again. And it's something that they could consider if they wanted to go that route. But the problem to me is just that it's so deep. I don't know how you even go about fixing it in one offseason unless you hit at a historic rate. That 21 free agent class and the team that they built around that Super Bowl run, really it was 20 and 21 by the time it all came together. They missed on Trey Waynes, but they hit on just about everybody else between DJ Reader, Chidobe Awuzie, Mike Hilton, some veteran leaders in that group as well. But they also, they didn't have homegrown elite talent, but they had homegrown guys that were contributing at least at a high level at that time and were getting solid play across the board and that more cohesive effort, especially in the playoffs when you started getting those quarterback specific game plans that are Lou Anarumo's specialty. Of course, Lou is now no longer with the Bengals. So it's something where you're hearing Zach Taylor asking for guys to step up, asking for guys to establish themselves as leaders. But what Art's talking about is the hard part is you got to be performing at a level that gives you the credibility to make those demands of your teammates, right? And so when you have one player on the defensive side of the ball who's been consistently above rate, DJ Turner's been excellent this season at cornerback since he took that job back over. Everyone else, inconsistent or just not good enough. DJ Turner's a third-year player. Where's that leadership going to come from? Who is going to step up? I find that question just kind of impossible to answer because of the way things have gone so far this year. And I'm very much in, I'll believe you got something when you show me you got something, because what they've shown us so far is one of the worst defenses, like I said, and like we've talked about in the last 25 years.
And the worst part about this all is that it is wasting what an incredible run Joe Flacco has been on in the last 4 games. But we are going to get into what has made him flourish over these last 4 weeks. Art will explain what he's seen, that the offensive line, as he mentioned earlier, 2 rookies are leading the way to what's been a very, very good Bengals offense these last 4 weeks. We'll get into that next on Bengals Squad. This show is brought to you by BetterHelp. And look, the days are getting shorter. The nights are coming earlier. It can start to feel a little heavier, especially when life is already packed with work, family, and everything else. This season, it's so important to reach out and check in with friends, family, or heck, even yourself. Just like checking on a teammate or reconnecting with someone you haven't seen in a while can lift your spirits. Reaching out for therapy can make a real difference too. BetterHelp makes that first step easier by connecting you with a licensed therapist online from wherever you are. I've noticed that simply talking things through, even for just a few minutes, helps clear my head and get me back on track. But therapy isn't just for when things are falling apart. It's about staying balanced and growing through the tough seasons. BetterHelp matches you with a therapist who fits your needs, and you can switch anytime if it's not the right match. Over 5 million people have used BetterHelp, and with 30,000 therapists available, finding support is really just a few clicks away. This month, don't wait to reach out. Whether you're checking in on a friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself, BetterHelp makes it simple to take that first step. Right now, listeners get 10% off their first month in BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon, because taking that step towards support might just leave you wondering, why didn't I do this sooner? Back on Bengals Squad right here. Sorry about that. Right here on Locked On Bengals, the Locked On Bengals YouTube channel. We'll get Art here back in just a few minutes. So we're going to talk about Joe Flacco because he has been on an incredible 4-game run since becoming the Bengals starting quarterback. There we go. We got him. Week 6, he took over against the Green Bay Packers. He has been terrific since then, really since the second half of that Green Bay game. Art, I'll turn to you. You being a former offensive line coach, what are you seeing from the guys up front? As you mentioned with 2 rookies, Dylan Fairchild, 3rd-round pick out of Georgia, Jalen Rivers, 5th-round pick out of Miami, Florida. What are you seeing from them that's allowed Joe Flacco to just sit back and pick defenses apart with the 2 best receivers he's ever played with, and also allow Joe Flacco to lead on, wait for it, a running game led by Chase Brown?
Well, I tell you what, it is, as far as talking about the guys up front, they got 2 young, talented kids that are in there and they're learning their way through, but yet they're still playing physical. They're really good athletes as guards in the inside. But the thing that's great that you really want to build that continuity is they are bookend by some veteran, very salty. They know how this game is played. They know how to get things. And when they can't think of a line call, then those veterans step in. And so not everything is on those guys. You know what I mean? So with the centers and the tackles, they're helping those young guys out quite a bit. And hey, just allow them to go out and play. And the great thing it is hey, they're having a blast doing it, you know, and that's the fun thing about watching as their O-line's starting to go about their business. As far as Joe's concerned, you know, here is a crafty veteran who's been in a lot of systems. So no system surprises him. So when he came a couple of weeks ago, you know, he steps in and he beats the Steelers right out the get-go, you know, right when he steps in the building. What they didn't dumb it down. They kind of made it something that he was familiar with, and everybody else just followed suit. And they came out of victory. And so every week since, they've added a little bit more and a little bit more to his package of stuff that he can do. And now they're flourishing. Now you can utilize those true great wideouts. And look what happens. People are so afraid of getting torched because you got a strong arm quarterback that now they're playing too high, whether it be too deep where the middle of the field's open, or they're playing quarters, 4 deep, and now they're capable of running the football. Now you're dealing with the front seven. And those run fits, on the other hand, those safeties are a little bit cautious to get involved in the running game because they can be play actioned over the top. And so it's kind of all fitting together, and it's a great job by the Bengals offensive staff of building it around Joe at this time and allowing him to go out and play while they're also keeping everybody involved. And as you look at the way that they're playing, I always used to say, you know, you stimulate them early in the week, you inspire them in the middle of the week, and then you motivate them at the end of the week. Well, the game plan's inspirational to them. After practice, they've inspired of what kind of game plan they got going on. And then all you got to do is the motivation and the self-motivation at the end of the week to continue to go on. And I think that's a very good job that Zach has done on offense. And, hey, you know what? Defensively, you need to do the same thing. Put in a new scheme early. See how it goes. Bring in some pressures. Challenge the DBs. Can you lock up man? Can we play zone pressures? What are we going to do? And get them going so they all performing on all cylinders, and then go out there and play well.
Oh, sorry, I was muted there. Jake, what are you, like, when Joe Flacco came to the Bengals in an in-season trade, which we don't normally see from the Bengals, but we've seen some now throughout the Joe Burrow era, did you think he would be this good, this prolific, and us talking about, yet again, a great quarterback season from Joe wasted in Cincinnati?
Not even close. Joe Flacco hasn't done anything like this at this level, maybe ever. You go back to the heater he caught when Baltimore won a Super Bowl with him. I mean, that's probably his best stretch of games in his career. But from an offensive operation perspective, going from Jake Browning to Joe Flacco, night and day. Jake Browning was flustered in the pocket, couldn't get the ball out on time, didn't seem to really understand what defenses were trying to do to him, was putting the ball in harm's way. And Joe Flacco steps in and is immediately like, well, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are pretty good. They can catch the ball with their hands. I mean, that's blowing away Joe, which is hilarious that he's like marveling at their ability to pluck the ball out of the air with their hands instead of body catching. And he's played with some good receivers. I mean, Anquan Bolden, late career Steve Smith. Like, it's not like Joe. I mean, he's been around long enough, right? He's played with some guys, but no guys quite like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. But what he was doing in Cleveland this year, what he had done recently, there was no reason to really believe that Joe Flacco was going to be great. I thought Joe Flacco would be able to put the ball where it was supposed to go, relatively on time, in a relatively good spot. But what we've seen from him has been beyond that. And what's been impressive to me is the kind of old school at this point ability to execute the package play from under center, where they have a run play called and Flacco's going under center and just flipping the ball out to Jamar Chase when he sees that numbers advantage, using that as an extension of the run game. And as Art pointed out, with these teams dedicating so many resources and staying on top of T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, whether it's true double-doubles, whether it's clouds, whether it's brackets, they found all the success in the run game. And it started against the Steelers. And this is a Steelers defensive front with TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith and Cam Hayward, who's a true ageless wonder. Speaking of ageless wonders that are going to be playing in this game with Joe Flacco, Aaron Rodgers, and Cam Hayward, the best of the bunch. Keanu Benton, a good young player, and the good rookie Derek Harmon from Oregon, who was a potential Bengals target in the first round. It was honestly, I'm trying to figure out if I'm more shocked by the way Joe Flacco's played, when Joe Burrow was cleared to return to practice, or the Bengals effectively opening up their running game, which had been putrid, had been terrible, had been the worst in the NFL going into that game against the Pittsburgh Steelers in that defensive front. And a lot of that isn't even because the Steelers were dedicating extra resources to the outside receivers for the Bengals. They were just straight up winning in the trenches, which Dalton Risner was playing left guard in that game. Dylan Fairchild returned to the lineup since then, and it was a great game for Risner. But if they can do that again, and the Steelers are highly incentivized, they've overhauled their defense after that Bengals game to try to deal more with the receivers they've played, that they've realized that their corners aren't good enough to just hang in man and cover one and all the single high stuff they want to do to get extra guys in the run fits. But that overhaul, we'll see if the Bengals can answer that by continuing to run the ball well. The Steelers were a terrible tackling team that first time around. Samaje Perine was a big part of that. He's doubtful this week. He hasn't practiced through a couple of days here. So I do think that one bears watching, but that's going to be huge. I mean, the run game is a huge part of this offensive success that has helped Joe Flacco to settle in with the things that he's been able to do well in this offense as well.
But Art, how hard is it for a quarterback to come to a different team mid-season and not only adjust to that, but play as well as he has, knowing that he's got two great wide receivers, but let's be honest, Jamar and T, they're alpha dogs, and they want the ball. So how impressive is it for someone like Flacco to just come in and just week after week, get them the ball?
Well, you know what? It is difficult. And you have to trust the system, one, which, like I talked about earlier, Joe's been a part of a lot of systems, and a lot of it is a lot of carryover. There's very few new inventions, just like there is on defense. The one thing that it has almost forced, when you have a Joe Burrow back there, you know what he's capable of doing, throwing the ball. So you're always going to lean that way. You're going to lean towards throwing it on first down, throwing it on second down. Next thing you know, you're on third and long, and you can't. You're not in manageable third down situations. Now you have a team that's not putting themselves in difficult third down situations by running the football and forcing yourself to run the football. And because of the looks that you have to get. And that's something that Pittsburgh has to do. They have to know, hey, when can they fit the box and when they can't, because they're going to run the ball and make it slow death as opposed to fast death by throwing the ball outside. And so I think they've got a great chemistry going on right now in terms of play calling and execution, where they just got to keep that going until they can get their guy back, and then allow those kids to do what they've been doing and let them go out and have fun and play.
Well, you know what Joe Burrow's capable of doing is beating the Steelers in Pittsburgh. He's done it 3 times in the last 4 seasons. But, Art, like you're saying, Joe Flacco is just as capable of going into Pittsburgh and winning. He's done it many times, including in the playoffs. We will get to the Bengals and the Steelers, previewing the game and maybe some predictions coming up next on Bengals Squad. This episode of Bengals Squad is brought to you by Prize Picks, and you and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It just takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. I've been using Prize Picks during both football Sundays and NBA tip-offs because It keeps every game exciting. And I like picking my favorite players like Patrick Mahomes and Steph Curry to see how my predictions play out. The new Stacks feature is a game changer. You can now pick more on Steph's points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. And let's be honest, you'll probably win with those kinds of bets. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. Right now, download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it is good to be right. Rounding out Bengals Squad, the debut maiden voyage episode with Jake Liscow and Art Valero as we get ready for the Bengals and the Steelers Sunday at Heinz Field. Don't forget to check out Jake and James and their mega Bengals Steelers preview tomorrow. James and Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers did their crossover Thursday edition earlier this morning. If you haven't checked that out yet, highly recommend doing that. So, Art, you've coached in many NFL division games. Was the message in the room different? I'll go back to the 2010 Seahawks. When you guys were playing the then St. Louis Rams for the NFC West title. And what was the overall vibe surrounding the team in the facility and then on game day knowing, hey, we're playing our division rivals for all the marvels?
Well, you know what? Divisional games are huge. One thing you go in and you talk about it during training camp. How we get to the playoffs, that's our goal, is you got to win the games you can win, and you got to win the divisional games. And whether they're early or whether they're late, whether they're pretty or whether they're ugly, you have to win those games. And they're big because you do play them twice a year. They become very familiar to you. And from a personnel standpoint and from a schematic standpoint. So you have to be on your toes. You have to do things right. And they're usually slugfests. And so you're going to say, hey, this is a true measure of who we are and what we can be. And let's go out and put it on 1 week, and we'll take them one game at a time.
Oh, sorry, my mic was muted there. Again, how big is this game for the Bengals? Because here's the crazy thing. If they win, and there's no reason to suggest they can't, except the defense, they're going to be 3-0 in the division. As crazy as that is, if you're sitting after Sunday 4-6, but 3-0 in the division, and knowing Joe Burrow could return, that dramatically changes this season.
I mean, if you're going to win the AFC North, as Jamar Chase just said in his press conference on Thursday that's happening or just finished up, it's a must-win game. And we're going to be saying that a lot down the stretch. We said it a lot down the stretch last year as the Bengals went from a 1% chance to make the playoffs up into the mid to high 40s by the end of the years from all the playoff prediction models. All they can do is try to win the games in front of them. But, it's a challenge every week when you have a defense giving up 33 points a game. And we've been talking about that defense plenty in this episode, and that remains a challenge. Are you going to get another shootout? And on the other side, the Bengals home road splits on offense are pretty pronounced. They're gaining almost a full yard less per play on the road than at home. That split is worse this year. They're scoring 5 points less per game on the road than at home. And again, that's going back to 2021. If you look just at 2025, and I know a lot of this includes the Jake Browning games, and this is skewing the numbers. This is crazy, though. Their points per game at home this season, and I know the Jake Browning numbers really skew this, but points per game at home this season for the Cincinnati Bengals, 32 points per game. They just had a great stretch at home the last 3 weeks, 3-game homestand, really pumping those numbers up. On the road, do you have any guesses? 12 points per game on the road. They're scoring 20 fewer points on the road. It's crazy. You can't do that this week. A lot of that is because Jake Browning was playing in those road games. Has to be so much better this week with Joe Flacco running the show. But the Steelers have made adjustments. I was talking to Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers for our crossover this week. And the Steelers, because of the way that first Bengals game went, have stopped playing single high so much, have stopped playing so much man, or playing a lot more two high shells, or playing a lot more spot drop, and have totally overhauled their safety room by moving Jalen Ramsey from corner to safety, trading for Kyle Duggar, and releasing Juan Thornhill. So overhaul in the Steelers secondary from an approach perspective, schematically, from a personnel perspective. And that's going to be the challenge for the Bengals this week as they try to figure out how to play football on the road and score, well, more than 12 points would be a good start.
That it would. Art, is it like, did you notice with your teams differences in offensive production at home and on the road, especially because you coached in the NFC South, where you either were playing in domes or you were playing in warm weather environments. So when you went outside the division, in your case, did you notice a difference in terms of the offensive production you got versus when you were playing at the confines of Raymond James Stadium?
Oh, absolutely. From a weather standpoint to you name it. You know, the one thing is about playing at Raymond James that was very, very interesting is the more humid it is, the stickier the ball is, right? And those colder climates, all of a sudden the ball doesn't have that tackiness that it had at home. So we performed a little bit different. But the good thing about it is we had a great defense that kept them in check. So, and that's what won it for us. Now, let me tell you a very interesting story about what I see is where the Bengals are right now. It, like we all talked about how important this game was to them. You got to win those divisional games. In 2010, I was in Seattle, and we ended up winning the NFC West with a 7-9 record, right? So we got the first round at home against the defending Super Bowl champs in the New Orleans Saints. We won it. All right. So now we were 8-9. We go to Chicago, and cold, hard field. We lost both tight ends with concussions, and we end up getting beat by Chicago. And I'm saying that is a situation, not that they get beat at the end, but that's a situation that as long as they win their divisional games, they got a chance to make the postseason. And so that's what makes all of these so much more important than just the comment, oh, we're playing the Steelers this week, we're playing the Browns this week, we're playing Baltimore close to Thanksgiving. And Baltimore's starting to roll now. They're getting all their guys back, and they had those early injuries, and hopefully that's what happens with Cincinnati is they've had early injuries and they could be full speed ready to go the month of December and into January and get on a roll.
2 of your next 3 games are against division opponents. You have 4 division games remaining. 2 of them are on the road. 2 of them are at home. So you mentioned if you can somehow find a way to win those games, you're going to have to do it Sunday without Joe Burrow. You may have him for Thanksgiving. You may have him, hopefully, it sounds like they will, for the second Ravens game on December the 14th, and then the Browns to finish the regular season in Week 18. But it goes back to, again, even though you're sitting at 3-6, you look at the AFC North. The Steelers have lost 2 straight. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games. The Ravens, yes, Art, you mentioned, they're starting to get rolling a little bit. They've won 3 straight, although Lamar Jackson, now we're back on the injury watch with him leading into their game against the Browns. By the way, the Ravens have not swept the Browns since 2020, interestingly enough. And the Browns, I mean, I think they're out of it. But, Jake, I think what's interesting is you look at when the Bengals are playing the Steelers. You remember this 2 years ago, as unfortunate of a memory as this is, the Bengals had won 3 straight games. The Steelers had lost 3 straight games. If the Bengals had won this game on December 23rd of 2023, they would have been 9-6. They, I think, would have gone on to the playoffs, but they lose to Pittsburgh 34-11. Pittsburgh ultimately goes to the playoffs, winning 3 straight games to end the regular season. The Bengals don't. So let me ask you this. Are you nervous about playing the Steelers, knowing they're coming off an embarrassing loss at the Chargers on Sunday night? Or are you like, this may be a good time to play them, especially considering the Bengals just beat the Steelers 3.5 weeks ago?
I mean, I guess it's a cop-out answer. I don't think it matters at all. I think what is going to matter is how they play once they start playing football. And I mean, look, there's some sort of magic with these Mike Tomlin teams where they're going to get to a winning record. They're going to win some games they shouldn't win. They're going to lose some games they shouldn't lose, and it's going to look weird to get there. And we'll see what version we get this week. But the reason that I don't think it particularly matters what the Steelers have done lately is the last time these teams played, the Steelers converted 7 of their 10 third downs. In the 3 games since, they've converted 15% of their third downs. The Bengals on the season are giving up third down conversions 50% of the time. And if I was setting an over-under this week, I'd put it around 60%. And so I don't particularly think that what the Steelers have done lately matters when the Bengals have been what they've been, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And if they don't get Aaron Rodgers to gift them a turnover or two, as you got a couple, and DJ Turner had a spectacular play to create one of those the first time these teams played. But if you don't get that, it's going to be a lot to overcome for this offense as the Steelers are once again tailor-making changes for their defense because of what the Bengals have done to them. So, we'll see how those factors play out, but I personally don't know how much it matters what the Steelers have done lately, because it's not like what they've done lately is predicated on guys getting hurt. And, suddenly TJ Watt's out and they can't win a game without TJ Watt, or suddenly Aaron Rodgers is out and they can't win without Aaron Rodgers. It's the same Steelers team. It's the same guys. It's just I think it's just more matchups than anything. And this matchup is not one that should be particularly scary to the Steelers outside of dealing with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, which should be scary to everyone in the National Football League, and it's something that all the Bengals opponents have to contend with. But the Bengals defense, are you talking about another shootout? We're talking about another game where, you got to stop an Aaron Rodgers Hail Mary with 4 seconds left, because if you get to that point, you're probably in a pretty good place considering the way this game could go for the Bengals.
But Art, when you were coaching, did you ever talk to your team about, hey, we're getting them at a time where they're reeling. Let's scrape them off the plate. Let's bury them. Let's make their season more miserable. Did you ever talk about that? Or was it like, guys, it's 0-0. It's a brand new week, rivalry game, records, what they've done leading up to this does not matter. What was your message, or John Gruden's message, Pete Carroll even, to the team in a game like this?
Hey, it's the most important game of the season. Reason why isn't because of who you're playing. It's because it's the next game. And you talked about it earlier. The Steelers their coaches have film. And so they're studying it. They're working on the last time they played. This is where we're not acceptable. This is what we have to do. We have to go out there and play. We're at home. They're going to crank up Renegade before you get out there, get the crowd into it. And so you just got to go out there and make it. You got to be a self-driver and a self-motivator to get out there when you step between the lines. And it's very, very important. It's a big game. And why? Because it's the next game. But you don't look at, hey, you know what? It always cracks me up when guys go, well, you haven't beat them in 4 years. Well, this is a different team than 4 years ago. It's a different team. And so there's a cloud hanging over that defense right now. And believe me, I've watched a number of podcasts this week from our competitors. Wow, are people negative? They're in a positive thing. And these gentlemen, they're paid professional players, and they have to act like pros. And I think that's probably the biggest message that Zach and the defense and the offense are still putting through. Hey, don't get stuck on your laurels. Don't get too infatuated with prosperity, because you know what? You are in the National Football League. And whether you like it or not, anything can happen on Sunday.
Steelers have lost 3 of the last 4 games. The Bengals have lost 6 of their last 7. So as you mentioned, this is the most important game, and it definitely is that way when it's the Bengals and the Steelers. Let's conclude this Bengals Squad edition with our predictions for Sunday. Jake, if you're giving your prediction on the show tomorrow, you can feel free to hold it until then. Your prediction for the Bengals and the Steelers, 1 o'clock Sunday on CBS with the great Kevin Harlan, Trent Green, Melanie Collins on the call from Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh.
Well, I'm Mike Tomlin's a very good friend of mine.
He is.
We were in Tampa together. They're at home. They're coming off a loss. If I was a bettor, I would put my money on the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Okay.
But prove me wrong, Bengals.
How about that? Jake, are you going to give your prediction, or are you just going to say this game will come down to, what do you think?
I think that the way the Bengals could potentially steal this one is if they can cobble together some takeaways. I think that expecting anything else from this defense is expecting too much. I don't think that it's fair to expect them to show significant strides in season. I don't think that it's fair to expect the guys they have available to them to significantly transform just because they had a bye week. And so the path to me is, can the Bengals create some turnovers and give themselves some extra opportunities, steal some possessions? That's how they did it the first time they beat the Steelers. The other big factor here is they're going to have to hold up in protection, where the Steelers weren't necessarily finishing plays in the pass rush early in the season. And we saw that the first time these teams played. They've got 10 sacks in the last 2 weeks, 5 sacks in each of those games. And with Joe Flacco dealing with that AC joint, he did throw in practice on Thursday after taking Wednesday off. It's still a bit of an issue. You got to keep him upright as much as you can. I talked about the running game quite a bit as well. If they're able to run the ball, that gives them a shot on offense. But the concerns for me really primarily on the defensive side of the ball, in terms of just giving them a chance to keep this thing competitive in the fourth quarter.
I go back and forth on this, because I think the realistic thing for me to say is the Steelers are going to win this game. But I also think about what Jamar Chase and T. Higgins did to them the last time these two teams played. And as you mentioned, the Bengals defense in the second quarter of that game, Jordan Battle and DJ Turner both had interceptions. Those led to 10 points. The Bengals went on to win the game 33-31. The Bengals haven't had any takeaways the last 2 games to sort of diminish how their defense has just not been able to get stops, tackles, etc. My hope is they can do that on Sunday. And I think, here's the thing. This defense, I said after the Jets game, it can't get any worse. It did. After the Bears game, it can't get any worse. I hope I'm right, because if I'm not, I'm going to look stupid. But you know what? I'm going to say it anyway. I think the Bengals, with the news that Joe Burrow is practicing, I think the defense is going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Revived, rejuvenated, maybe a different mindset, motivated. I think they go into Pittsburgh, somehow pull this off. I'm going to go 31-28. They get the win, and then we are having a great show on Sunday. You, me, and Mike Santagana, Bengals_Sands of Cincinnati Bengals Talk. And we're going to be looking forward to a home game against the New England Patriots, where Joe Burrow may or may not play. I would say not, but you never know. I mean, he's already crushed his rehab. So I'm going Bengals 31, Steelers 28. Jake, Art, any final thoughts before we close this maiden voyage of Bengal Squad?
Hope you're right, buddy.
You know what? The great thing is we get to talk about it from here. The players have to do it. The players have to go out there and play.
That is very true. That is exactly true. Well, we'll be back Sunday afternoon following the Bengals and the Steelers right here on the Locked On Bengals YouTube page. We will let you know of the time of that show. Art, you and I will be joined by Mike Santagana. Of course, Jake, you and James will have your recap. And then Jake, Art, and we hope to have James on the show next week as we look towards the New England Patriots in Cincinnati. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Great start to the weekend. Don't forget to check out James and Jake tomorrow on Locked On Bengals and make that your first listen. And then, of course, for your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Now 2-a-days with Tyler Rowland in the morning and Tony Wiggins in the afternoon. Big weekend in Cincinnati. You got the number 25 Bearcats hosting the Arizona Wildcats Saturday at Nippert Stadium. You can check out Locked On Bearcats with Jeff Carr. He also co-hosts the Locked On Reds podcast. This has been Bengals Squad. It's part of the Locked On Bengals and Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network, your team every day. For Jake Liscow and Art Valero, I am Alex Frank. We'll talk to you Sunday afternoon following the Bengals and the Steelers right here on Bengal Squad. Gentlemen, I think that was a good show.
Oh, well, thank you guys.
Says we're
Art,
still live, Alex. Are you sure we're not live anymore?
I
here?
just ended the stream. Did I not end the stream?